Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to all the people who are here with us today on site, but also to all the people who are watching this course via video conference through our platform that Dr. Leonor Rocha is going to present right away. We are here today within the project TrainMoS Deutsch, within the network, the Trans-European network. And we want to give you some trainings in terms of master, post-graduations, but also continuous training for professionals, like the training we are doing today. And we are here trying to give some training on subjects that have to do with the motorways of the sea. This is the first course that we're going to promote. We will also have two more dedicated to the management and the development of intermodality from the 21st to the 25th, and also the management of the supply chain from the 12th to the 16th, and between the 19th and the 20th. We'll be here also at the APDL. Magella is here with us, and this association is here based in Porto, but has also offices in Brussels, and represents the Portuguese interests in Brussels, among which the themes that are related to the sea. So welcome everyone. And I'll now give word to our partner, Dr. Valdemar Cabral, who is the representative of APDL and the Center of Training of Leixões. Good afternoon, everyone. In name of APDL and Port Leixões, I'd like to welcome all the people who are here today and the people who are accompanying us from a certain distance. I'd like to thank Magellan for the challenge that has been given us to participate in an action that has specific characteristic, because it's an action that takes place here but is going to be accompanied outside the national territory. So it's for us a great pleasure to be part of it. As we said before, this action will have two more modules in October, and will be developed in the same way. The Center of Training here is a structure that has to do with training in the maritime and port training. It has been developing lots of training activities nationally and internationally as well, namely with the different ports of countries where Portuguese is the official language. We also collaborate with Venezuela and the entity that manages the transportations here there in Venezuela. We also have other partnerships with French-speaking countries, so we're quite motivated and quite available to develop training within this port sector. We're certified by the national entity, the church, in several areas of training activities, computer training, management. So in these areas, we can certify that these trainings will give you the right to a certificate of frequency that will be given to all participants. We wish you a great work. Thank you for this partnership. This action will have here two trainers, Rui Cunha and Mario Vieira, the operational director of Port Leixões, so someone who's used to dealing with these topics and who will give you the best knowledge so as to contribute for this purpose, that is the social responsibility of ports, and namely in the areas of sustainability and social topics as well. Good work, everyone. Once again, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. I'm Leonor Rocha, and I'm a collaborator of Magellan, and my role here is to be behind the computer over there and to control the platform that is doing the communication with people who are participating by video conference. We have several participants throughout Europe. We are going to try to speak to them as well, to have a dialogue. since we're going to be in video conference with them and it's kind of an inedited situation, we have this possibility to this communication tool that allows us to be here and to listen and speak at the same time. And so they're going to be able to participate, maybe not as actively, but they'll participate anyway. They can write on the board, a board similar to ours, so we'll have this possibility. If they have some kind of question, we're gonna ask them to use the microphone to be able to be translated, because the sessions are being translated into English at the same time for the people who are taking part in this video conference. This option was made because it was much easier than having all the sessions here in Portugal. So if you have any kind of question you want to ask, please use the microphone. Do not hesitate in using it for these people to participate actively as well. So they can participate over there as well and hear what we're going to say and what we're doing. Great training for all of you, and thank you very much. Time to go to sleep? Very good. Is everything okay for what I need? Great. We do not need great presentations. Basically, everyone who's here is someone we already know. We've crossed paths before. 2 hours here for what is proposed here is very little, because each of these themes could represent several days of sessions. So the objective here today is to at least try to focus on some reflection points, to highlight some points here. 2 hours not going to be much. I had to cut 50 slides out of my presentation yesterday, and even so, I asked for you to have the full version of my work. I divided, so the theme is the evolution of maritime transport and the impact in ports, and also the impact that the port itself has in the city and the city's activities as any great industry. I divided this in 3 groups. I hope I'll be able to treat all of them. So first of all, a small approach regarding the way maritime transport has evolved here in Porto, and what the impacts of this evolution were here and how positive they were for Porto. A second topic where we'll be talking about the impact in ports, and also what the port could do for the city. We're not going to develop on mitigations here. Mitigation, their impact. I usually don't like talking about the impact without saying what we're doing to mitigate them, but here it's another theme. And finally, talking about what's going to be our activity. Each great industry creates some impact in the city and its environments, and our function within the port is to have some responsibilities, and we need to manage in terms of mitigation. We have to take care of measures and try to create solutions that could be definitive and eliminate some problems. Excuse me if I speak a bit faster for the translation. Globalization is a word that is as big as the concept itself. I'm just mentioning it here because maritime transport and shipping are, without any doubt, one of the most global industries that we have. We must think that the ship brings reference from ports everywhere, substandard ports, and of course they have several issues that are imposed to them during these operations. So a ship that passes through Leixões has been all around the world, and it has references to several ports and the technologies that are present there. Today, the dislocation of the centers, especially in terms of globalization, it's important for us as ports to take account into mobility. We have a great transference of products, of raw materials from some places of the world who come to areas a bit more technologically advanced, so to say. And of course, after transforming this goods, we have to send them back. So production mobility is very important and associated to technologies of information, which have accelerated this process as well. The ports being inserted in this globalization, as I said before, it has a great impact. Ships go all around the world, but you'll see that it's very easily done. It's a business that very quickly reacts and provokes some alterations in the behavior of consumers and in procedures as well, namely in terms of technologies. So there's a growing trend of relocation these production centers to more distant parts of the world. And it has generated some anxiety and large volumes of raw materials transference. It's often very not linked to oil and fuels, but we have here lots of routes that sometimes work in the contrary way. And with the maturing and the adjustments that the business is doing, generally in great intercontinental lines, it conditionates a bit this route, this global route. 90% is the number that we all know. 90% of the cargo volume that is consumed in the cities goes through the ports, and so besides this number, we can see that 62% of the value that is used passes through the port. So this is a new vision on maritime transport. They have to go from starting point to arriving point, and maritime transport can give answer to these great routes, especially when it comes to great cargoes, cereals, and also a more fragmented sector, but also unified in a way, is the container ship. When compared with different transportation modes, maritime transport still is an important transportation means. We have here the cost of transportation by ton and by mile. We can see that rail and water transport are much lower. So as you know, today there are several projects, short shipping. The sea routes have a tendency to transfer from cars and road transportations to maritime transport. Now we're going to speak a bit about environmental questions. As we can see, in terms of production, of pollution and emission of gases of the several transportation means, we can see that the ship and shipping in general is not in the best position, but by cargo units, they're presented as one of the most ecological means of distributing this merchandise.
And of course, we all know the concerns that we have today around production of shipments, of CO2 emissions in ports, but there are indeed other problems that we need to have and to see and analyze ahead. Just to give you an idea, the number is not the most important because it's a relative number, but in O14 it has 9 billion tons of cargo. So this is important to say that they are divided in 3 types of ships: bulks, oil products and fuels, refined products, and other cargoes that are fractioned And so it is important to see the importance, and because in containers, they are indeed the segment of transportation that's more dynamic, that 52% of the global value of the merchandise that is transported is made in containers, and this is easily understood because clearly raw materials and products are present in transformation, and then the transformed values where the value was added. In fact, they transport proceeding in cargoes of added value, and also um, with a validity date. Also, they need to be carried in containers. Today, nowadays, containers trying to solve transportation problems, making a transfer of the general cargo for the unit of transporting containers without going into economy and concepts. That's not what's important here. What we see is that these two slides, although they can be applied to different scenarios of my intervention, when I want to tell you is that, in fact, seaborne trade obviously has accompanied the cycles, the economical cycles, and if you will, global ones also. If we were to see for these last few years, every time we had a depression in economical term, there is a coldness of economy on a global scale. The cycles, the quantity of cargo that is transported is accompanying, clearly almost overcomes these colors. And so economy, we saw a depression here in '09. There was an attempt to recover it, and these last few years. So clearly the cycle here is accompanying this tendency. What I want to just to introduce this question here for us regarding ships and ports and the port business for us is very important because it establishes many time relationships in the everyday life with the port business also. Clearly, this is a map that tends to compare what is search and the offering the supply in ship transportation. Well, the transport is as searched for as the quantity exists. So, and the contrary is also true. We have some moments in which supply and demand, I would say, they are almost out of control very clearly. And so it is within these times when it is an excess of supply that we hear there is a fall in freight, contention of costs, the pressure on us to reduce, to search for economical solutions arrives. And so aligned with the cycles of growth, many times there is a lack of balance between the supply and the shipment because it's difficult in terms of ships to accompany and to predict this excess of supply or demand and to inject more available transport is to inject bigger ships, more transportation. The ship cannot be made or built in 2 days, neither the other way around when there is a recession and a fall in the demand. We cannot dismantle the ships when we are expecting a cycle that we would hope would be of growth, and it's not. So in the crisis of 2009, then there is here a meeting point, and on the other hand, a kind of a balance, but still below the previous values that we had. How does the fleet, what is the behavior of the fleet? Well, we need to first establish that, well, who are the ones who combine this way of acting, this strategy? Well, that's of the 20 slides that I took out of my presentation, because if you were to analyze and compare the transportation, the operators, those who build ships, we can see there are a lot of top. The Greeks have the biggest fleet, but they are not operating. The one that have the biggest operator only has 50% of the ships, and so on and so on. So there is here in a certain moment of imbalance between supply and demand, and obviously operators are trying to delivering the ship, saying that I don't need it, so someone is accumulating this problem. So this is a cycle. Someone will have the ship somewhere, right? So this is has associated costs.
So this fleet and the behavior of the fleet is possible because if we were to compare the first five world operators, they will have 50% of the global operation. So if we see of the P3 Alliance, P5, which are the great operators trying to battle to be able to have an intervention in the market quota, but in terms of the definition, trying to find synergies in terms of costs, the supply of price, and of ships also. So when we were to compare the orders in 2009, for the backlog, the economy was accelerated, so there was no one who did not order ships. So the ships are ordered on the construction site, and when the depression arrives, they are completely full of orders. They have no capacity of getting more orders, and the ships are to be shipped. So what happened here, I wanted to characterize these last few years, which are a case study, but we cannot chain ourselves in this cycle. This is the life of shipping. So this cycle is due to this delay on delivering ships regarding cycles, and as the immediate consequence is the falling freight prices. In this circumstance, this last circumstance, with the price of fuel being very, very high, and it brings a complicated situation in intercontinental travels. So resuming this in the framework, the economy has slowed down. Almost 50% of transportation today has a drop from 9 to 7%, and the numbers here, the figures here are irrelevant. There is a drop, there is less demand, and when we see about industrial products also, and so a demand for transport that's dropping, and an offer of the increase of 6% of the DWT supply, and the supply also of transportation to TIOS. Everyone knows what TIOS is, right? We all know this. So it's a unit in a container, is growing. So this is generating a problem for construction sites, that everyone is trying to stop building, renegotiating, trying to delay. These were the 20 slides that I removed. A series of actions of those who are within the business trying to compensate and control their losses. Maersk is the news like any other, present loss of millions on these last few years. This is a theme that would follow, but just to give you an idea, there are things to do. In this time of crisis, there is an attempt of having some reactions. I am not going into detail here, but there are some measures that we can try to compensate and have some gains again. This is a situation that we have been seeing nowadays, and it's not balanced still. Despite it's a global business, it's really sensible, and these economical cycles generate, if there is not an attempted recovery in the market, losses or gains are quite elevated. So the fleet for this last few years has been influenced by, and all this path, just look at it as there is an explanation that I'm trying to give you to understand how this has generated impact in ports. To summarize, this brings us to feel in the ports the pressure of this path. So the fleet has been influenced by the need of reducing costs, reducing travel time, faster ships, bigger, more efficient, waiting time. The waiting time has to do with the efficiency of our process, of our working ports, of our answer capability when we have the ships at our door. And so looking for a transit time that's more guided to efficiency of the work in the terminal, to have fluidity, flows, low cost, as a colleague of ours said, it is a time that no one wants to buy, but that needs to be paid for to reduce port costs. This with more efficient ships, more maneuverable, do not using towers, doing self-handling if possible, and clearly with the pressures that we have on all of us, it's almost a citizenship duty to contribute in order for this to be made safely, but also in a sustainable way in terms of environmental issues. The solutions that we are trying to find for this conjoint reduction is by buying bigger ships, and I'll explain why. Faster ships, transit type, specialized ships because they can offer operations that are more efficient, more effective, that are adjusted to that type of operation. This is double, sorry. Reducing global travel costs, it has, of course, are composed for different costs. Nowadays, the cost of fuel, it's the blue one, is a very important cost. When I shipped 40 years ago, we would use whatever we want. Today, in fact, is extremely important for the ship, and clearly without debating this here today, but in order for you to understand that associated to the size of the ship, there is a clear reduction of the global cost of the trip, the scale cost, and some components of fuel, reducing on the efficiency and modernity of the ships. Ships with 10 years are scrapped today. I made a study here that compared with that one gives us for 4,000 to 10,000 years a reduction in scale of from 70 to 50. And so the cargo that's in the containers has been with a decrease in growth of the size of the ship associated with an attempt of being able to get a freight price by unit or by slot by navigated mile. I don't have another figure that I have, another graphic, but this is essential for the build of the ship that can be reduced from 4 to 10,000. It's not further from 30% when you buy a ship divided by the cargo that it can transport in terms of cargo units. All of this goes in the same direction that the growth of the size of the ship is the same thing. So we haven't seen that container ship, but it's the same for all of them. It's a generation of ships that are almost growing year by year. So we have a decalage of the cycle when we are adjusting the ports, like us in Leixões. We were here in the ships. Where are they? 250. We are trying to get to 300 meters. When we are preparing for this one, the others were here already. So a work in a port has a preparation time, it has a time to be done, a time to be debated, and so we say that ships are always navigating in the same old problems. We are just finished the port that we have, made it larger, we have increased it, we have all the problems solved. There is a problem with no constraints, but we are announcing this measure, and someone says, well, I have a ship that has more than 10 meters, and it has more than this or that, and so we are living the same level of problem. And with the sequence of growth, that it's so fast for those last few years, of course, that this is our dilemma, if you will, in our everyday life, to find a new positioning in the market. This is the biggest ship that is in the market today, but if we see the other ones, the behavior is exactly the same, clearly associated with a growth boom of new building of ships. We were looking for steel. We have more ships of iron transport for the units of assembly. We had a transference of many times of components for the assembly from one place to the other. And in fact, there is a search for bigger ships in other areas, the market. Talking about specialization of the terminal, of course, that specializing the ship and the terminal once again gets better rhythms, better developments, better performances. So in the end, better costs by cargo unit. These are some examples. All of us know these examples. There is a characteristic here of the Ro-Ro ship that also has trains on it. So when we have the intermodality, trying to search for a mix of the transfer of cargo of the ship to other transport means, and here you see the part of the ship which has the clothesline that are adjusted to the terminal, so the train comes here with uh, the cargo, and it just comes straight into the ship. And what we used to say is that the cargo will continue changing the mean without being a port in which the point is dropped in. So this concept is being sought today. So the LNG ships with the consumptions that are being higher and higher every day. So we are now with ships of this size. Obviously, by the type of cargo, natural gas has a cycle of value that for the last few years had a huge development. It has been able to transport in cheap prices or cheaper prices LNG. As you know, LNG, when it's cooled to 1600 degrees, it comes 600 times its volume. So this was a way that we found to carry cheaper by liquefying only by lowering temperature. They have no unit to cool down the gas. It's almost like a thermal bottle that's huge with a good insulating perspective. And so there is some particles, of course. There are some chimneys that went to the atmosphere called boil-offs that had air pressure and it went into the atmosphere. But nowadays, this gas is taken care of for the gas turbines, and it's used again. Usually, it was quite dangerous or associated with the ship. Many times they were forbidden. Terminals near the coast, they would be offshore terminals. But today, we are dealing better with our fears. Before we were dependent of the pipeline that came through Alentejo, and now Sinch has 50% of our consumption. So there is a possibility of storage and then of trying to regas. It's an inverse operation in order to inject it in the network. They let it heat, and then it becomes vapor again. There is a series of caves filled with liquefied gas. There are natural reserves.
With this offer of LNG, lots of projects around the ship are using this LNG. They're trying to lower the emissions, they're trying to lower the cost of fuel, of course. All the others are projects and designs. But this ship here is a project that has a perspective of delivery in 2016, and so it's the first ship in construction. Of course, the supply chain network right now is in its natural growing cycle, but during the next years we'll be assisting to an increase in the demand of LNG ships. I had 40 minutes to get here. I didn't count. I don't know if I respected it. What time is it? Okay. Do you want to exchange some ideas now? You or our colleagues who are watching us via video conference? Questions on this theme that we're not going to break completely, but we're going to move on to another theme and see the impact of this growth in the port. Any questions? Everything clear for everyone? Great. So there was a break, but it was not the coffee break yet. It was just a little break. As I said before, the port stopped long ago to have that old idea that a port is a great terrain where you can park your boat and just unload your cargo until someone comes and pay the customs fees or take them away. now arises the concept of intermodality, of multimodal operations. If a ship could almost naturally change transportation means, just for example, the ships who arrive with the cargo for the customer and deliver it immediately as they arrive. So in this search for cost reduction, we've been trying during this last years. I usually say that we were amphibian companies. The business was to go from a point to another, go through the sea from one port to another and bring the cargo. Given the scale I mentioned earlier, what happens is that we're now trying to operate in other terminals because there's a critical mass that asks, why do we represent such a percentage, but why don't we unload ourselves the ship? Why do we load it ourselves? So the first phase of the story has been about making us making the ports as centers of cost and not centers of gains. Until today, it has been affecting the purity of the port activity. I usually divide what are moved containers, this year 150 million, you already know this number apparently, by the number of movements that have been done by the container, which are 600 million. I generally obtain 3.9, which means that the business of the operation is 4 times superior to the transport needs. So I always had to transport 160 million containers from one point to the other. But why? Because a container goes to a mega and then changed to a up, then to a transshipment, and until arriving to its destination, it already made 4 movements. So you can see how this business is being constituted as an interesting and important business. And if we see which were the first 7 or 8 operators, they represent 6 to 7% of the movement. So there's a great concentration of this business in great operators. The vertical concentration, so the great companies you know as MSC, TrainMoS, CGM, end up operating terminals, but they didn't just end up here. They wanted to add the other costs as well, such as route transportation, and so they wanted to take it directly from the factory and deliver it directly to the customer. For the freight forwarders, for example, that's very interesting. We have here a colleague that has his own customers and does it, and so they prepare the cargo to deliver to the customer, and so they know very well freight forwarders that are employed by these great operators to the production, to the delivery to the customer. This is a perspective that is very multimodal. It includes the whole transport chain, and when we said that most of the value that is today in container ships, nowadays no one makes stocks. The goods generally circulate in the distribution chain. One of the greatest groups that is seen as a model is Zara, that has summer and winter collections that circulate around the hemisphere. So today there's this research of tracking for people to know where their stock is, at what point of the chain it is, and it's something that we've been seeing more and more, and that some companies already have nowadays. Sometimes when we wear some socks, we find some chips in them. So this is to a company where the cargo is. Of course, this concept of growth of the ship, of multimodality, has created a new geography to this transport business. As I told you, when the ship grows as fast as it does, not all ports can answer to the ship. Not all ports can have them. And so, how was this question solved? And so we found peripheral ports called hubs, in which the great intercontinental routes are made, and so there are concentration points. We have, for example, one here in Portugal. And the cargo that get to these ports, a small percentage at least, that are to go to these great cities, pass through these ports and can then go to Europe. Speaking here of Portugal, but if we talk about the Mediterranean, for example, it's at a point of equatorial shipping. We have several points here on both sides of the canal where ships depart and follow their journey. So here are these four transportation needs that we spoke about. These are quite expressive in terms of the size of the port, and the great lines that you see here tend to adjust themselves to this new way, to this new transport geography. This ended up in overposition, or so to say, of ship routes, and so we can no longer see where the ships leave, but we can see where they most circulate. Evergreen did what we call an equatorial route, so goes through the Panama Canal, passes through Gibraltar, and continues its turn. And so in these great ups, we can see here the transoceanic commuters and going from east to west. And northern sea route as well. We can see as well an attempt to create journeys through the Northwest Passage and through the Arctic Bridge to try and win some time. There's been an attempt to create structures of a way to practice new routes in terms of combustible fuel and cost. 5 courses ago, we spoke about the ships were coming and that it would be difficult to continue improving them and keep this growth going. I'm sorry, it doesn't seem to want to appear. The ship we were discussing to know if he could grow, and there are already projects of greater ships to be sold, as you can see here. So all of this to continue on this tone regarding the growth of ships. The impacts on ports. Either we adjust, either we grow, or as it's happening here in Leixões, we have a problem here because ships are going next to us but do not give us an answer. We can find solutions or we can grow. There are no doubts. If the ships cannot get in, we have to find other solutions. So some ports, when the triples were announced, lots of ports couldn't receive them, but now Rotterdam and lots of ports in Europe have adjusted to the situation and now manage to welcome these ships. It was a great investment for the owner first, so they built and they put the ships in the market. The port business has to accommodate the situation in the sense of creating solutions to give answer to all the demand. This wasn't very interesting, so I'll just move on. I would like to say that Panama, for example, has launched a great construction work to be able to give answer to all the ships because they were reduced to 294 meters. That is approximately the size of a Panamax that has the maximum length of Panama. And so they started a great construction. I don't know if you were aware of it. That should be ready next year, but things are a bit delayed right now. But in 2015, there are not so many ships passing through Panama. The Tripolies do not go there anymore. So what I was saying is that this constant pressure of growth is felt there too. Panama wanted to solve all the problems of the world, and then we had some space to work with. But now it was time to enlarge a little bit the port, which wasn't done yet. So the mega hubs have been growing a bit everywhere, and we're talking about ports that welcome approximately 30 million containers. And so if we see the geography of the world, we see terminals that are in construction and that are trying to adjust to this growth. We can see construction works of large scale to try to adjust to the new dimensions of the ships. We can see here Leixões as well with its project of new terminal. It's still in discussion nowadays, but maybe for 4 or 5 years. But when we reach there, the needs will be others. We might be here during 5 years to do a revision. It's better than talk about it now. This question of maritime accesses. So it's not just about the port infrastructure. There's also a need for the canals to be ready for this. As we are in Leixões, I'll give you the example of Leixões, but this example applies to any other port. When we're talking about pressures, we're talking here of needs of investment in these canals in terms of gains in the technologies used. Lots of European ports have a tendency for automation, and it's one of the examples where there are no operators. Everything moves alone, everything by itself. It's all automatic. There are technologies that are charging the containers in the ships. There used to be operators to do this, but they no longer do. But the dimension was so big that it became a little bit complex to accompany this growth. And so currently there are already simulators and equipment to be able from an office to move and to use all the material to put the containers in the ships. These terminals generally have operation centers where you can find an operator. He controls several terminals at the same time, generally 5 to 7 portics. He doesn't actually operate it, but he manages the movement in it. Of course, when we speak about great concentration ports, we may speak about logistic areas. Leixões tends to accompany this tendency once again with great ease. They have a logistic platform of approximately 2 kilometers. The logistic platform is not a place where you can just concentrate cargo. These platforms are trying to work for a port, and there are areas when we add value to the cargo, when we can have vehicle expositions, where vehicles can be customized. This is one example, but there are many more. So the logistic platform is generally an area where you can just leave some cargo, but preferentially where these units can add a value, for example, assembly lines. All of these are very welcome businesses, and the purpose is, of course, to send or to receive cargo from the ships. When you speak of technologies, We can also speak of the evolution of the ships regarding technology. As I said in the first slide, they evolved a lot. So we all know that nowadays everything is on the internet and that everything is about communication. But we cannot forget that a few years ago, there were no ways of communicating on the sea. So it was very difficult only a few years ago, and even today, every day new innovations come up regarding communication and sharing information with the several ships. It's more and more easy. So the port has to follow this tendency and must have a technology that corresponds to these innovations. It stopped during some years, but then with the growth of technologies, of innovation, of the demand of less expensive solutions, now ports have to be information centers. There are now softwares that can be bought in packages, Platinum, for example. And so everything is integrated in these packages, the training as well. And so the ports have to try to interact. They have to look for fluidity. We talked about the accessibility and the security. So it's important to manage manage to adjust the technology to what happens in the port, as we've been trying to do here in Leixões. But there are also lots of examples in other VTSs where wireless are installed and interact with the equipment of the ship. These are investments and pressures that are created on the port. When we speak about growth and in more shipment and more ships and more cargo, it's not always the case, of course, in smaller ports, and we can see here a great affluence in the quantity of cargo that has been generating great issues in terms of accessibility to the ports. And we have here several levels of problems, hyperactivity, for example, but also the waiting times, the gas emissions. Nowadays, there are three competitiveness factors, in my opinion, and that is the management of the fluidity of route accessibility, documental accessibility, and maritime accessibility. There's no need for having a great route accessibility if then the cargo just stays in the port. So everything has to work together so as to not have blockages in a way. Everything has to work together. We have to innovate in the accessibility of the port, of course, to allow the rest to evolve. This is not the only solution, of course, but the guarantee of route accessibility to create new access, new routes. Leixões had the possibility of doing it. Lisbon has more difficulty in this aspect. We're trying to find new solutions outside the city, but the center of the city is trying to find a new vocation, as you see. Here, in terms of relation with the city, we can see that a passenger lives 9 euros in the city. Taxes, restaurants, tourist visits, for example. It's no use for having a great route accessibility if then everything just stays in the port, as I said before. So each port is trying to find its own solutions, but it's important to ensure fluidity at the gate. It usually doesn't have to do with the fact of the port being small. It has more to do with bureaucracy, with entrance and exit authorizations. And so the tendency in Leixões and in lots of other ports such as Leixões. We're not afraid here to say that we are a great example because we have a single port, because all the processes are centered here, both entrance and exit. We also have here the people who then move the cargo. We have the automatic control, we have the streamlined customs procedures, the automatic control. Without the transportation means having to stop at the gate to know to which park it has to go or to which park it has to pick up the merchandise. All of this is a great help. And of course, the integration in the IT common platform that might be for all the port. And here we introduced another concept that is the documental fluidity. This is another theme that could give us work for days, but I'd just like to say that a port is a very complex system, and we work every day in ports, and we ourselves are surprised with the quantity of actors that we meet every day. But there's a series of a public entity like customs, like frontiers. In the port, there's a lot of entities who all participate in sending the cargo, and we also have the interests of distributors and all other entities that have to do with the business. And each port needs to find its own solution, but he has to integrate and internalize all this communication that has to be done individually to internalize all this complexity around a platform manager that, in the case of Portugal, the port authorities have called to themselves, and they are kind of information brokers. They receive and share the information for all the business. This concept that we call the PSW has to do with the authorities that manage the platforms. Here, the idea is to receive and distribute the information to give fluidity to the documental process.
So the platform tends to be a single access, one-stop shop. In one stop, you have no place like the citizen shop of ports. And so the goals are to make faster for the process of the country and for those who are operating, to allow an interoperability of all the partners, and so the dispatch of the ship, integrating all that information. When we are here speaking of single window, we are seeing the ports. There are competing for this dispatching the port. Our goal, it's a goal of a Viseup, is to evolve to a single logistical window where we can interconnect the different port intersections and create networks among all of them, where we can publish businesses, a transport operator that wants to take the cargo from here to there. It brings cargo in Leixões, and what it needs is to understand what is the interconnection that connects between 2 points, and having price for each one of the intersections, and to choose if we go by train, because we were taking cargo from a great import in Portugal, for Algeciras, because the logistical operator is above all of this, and it's cheaper to remove the cargo in Algeciras, to put it in on a train, and then to trucks, because if I go to Leixões with a ship and the return, it's cheaper to go by land. So the operator, an importer and exporter also, that has factories here in Feira, and that took their cargo to Algeciras. So our network is fundamental, and we spoke about the window that comes within the intersection of ports, to include it on a network work, on a logistical services. Just a little bit to give you the idea that we are centralizing on the port authority is host of the platform. One thing is the concept, and the other is the platform that brings substance to it. Clearly, then, this implies to have, if you will, what we call a help desk to all the partners that interact with it, and public entities and private entities working. This is the platform. One is the concept, and the other is the platform that makes this possible. And here you see IT, and do not mix information system with an IT platform. It's the one that you interact with, and each one of our actions brings tasks to others and a need of answering. And the other is to have an IT system where we record things. So we have this idea, but we go beyond the impacts on ports. Here we see other problem, which is the impact created on the port and which the port itself creates in its activities to the surroundings. We all know that the ship, fuel, chemicals, water, that brings emissions, that has water discharges. Some are cleaner, others are not when we cannot control them. And so ports need to have a behavior in the sense of trying to raise awareness for the environmental behavior. There it's less correct from the part of the ship making services available. If we were to see each one of these cases individually, just to give you an idea, one of the problems is gas emissions. We have a tendency in the market and of a global concern of more efficient ships with cleaner fuels, as we saw LNG, but also creating rules very clear of trying to reduce and look for fossil fuels that are cleaner. Here we have 2 or 3 areas in the Baltic, in North America. Some of them are being debated. Here you can see, and where the reduction of the sulfur and naphthas and heavy fuels, it's mandatory that it needs to be consumed in the port by using fuels with low levels of these substances. There is a period here in 2018, 2020, in which we are debating that if all of a sudden there is a drop of the 3.5% to 1, I don't know if I still have the slide, yeah, I didn't get it. So for us, ports and a lot of agents ask us, well, is it mandatory to have 1% of the consumption? Well, in ports it is for a long time now. If the ship is more than 2 hours there, or if the time, as you know, the ships can consume heavy fuels, naphthas and fuels and everything else, and when they get to the port an hour before, they start passing fuel to burn lighter fuels. What is mandatory today, this exchange of fuel when the ship is getting near the ports. Of course, nowadays people are trying to use. When I went to sea 2 hours before, we would book on the book of records of the commander. We need to tell the machine to change fuel for them to gradually start changing it. So ports today, in fact, in Europe, more than there is a directive that makes it mandatory that ships, when are in port, can have fuel with 0.1% of sulfur index. If you ask me clearly if there is an effective warning, or if someone goes there to supervise these values, if there is a control there, in fact, in the book, in the diary, is registered this changeover of the fuel, and there you can understand that this supervision is not done every day, of course. All of us know what are ballast water. We know what the ships need to use. A ship with containers that uses as many containers that it has, the more ballast it needs to have. The serial fuel is the most cargo it wants to transport, the more ballast it has to give away. So when it is navigating with a cargo filled with cereal or minerals, the ballast of water, we all of us know what ballast water is. That colleague here, I don't know if she knows what this is. You're not connected with the sea, right? Just at the beach, right? Okay. So the ship navigating when the cargo hold is full because of the stability of the ship, and to have the coils underwater when they get to a port, when they are removing the cargo, it's filling the tanks with water from the port where it is. So the inverse process, when it's empty, it has the cargo hold empty, and then it does exactly the contrary. So, of course, that navigation, this implies transportation of, how can I put this, of marine species from one area to the other, that in a certain water of other port or other country can be seen as plagues. We had an algae in Tej, in the river Tej. We didn't know how it came here. We don't know if it was some of the species that came on a ship. So this is a problem that we are debating today. All the world is debating this. There is a huge tendency here. I don't have the exact number, but there are some billions of tons of water that are transported between countries. So many times there is a need of filling the ship after removing the cargo because it's completely void, and it's difficult to move the throttle because you lose the sinkability of the engines. So navigation is one of the biggest factors in this environment by the introduction of infesting species. 3.5 billion tons of water are transported globally between ports. There are measures now. I had an explanation for you, but in the full vision for MO15, all the ships, you have an approximating time of ships were being made since '09 to be adjusted first from a sanitary control of the water that's created, and then clearly with reasons that the theme is not today, the D2 system was almost to have water that's good enough to drink, of the effective control of the water with the assembly of systems for water treatment before being ejected and rejected. And this from the end of this year, of 16, probably most ships will be able to have this level 2. I gave you a document explaining what is each one of these subjects here. Other of the activities in the port that generate strong impacts on the environment, and this can be crucial. One of them are not avoidable when we are touching the bottom of the sea. Of course, there are species that are affected. Of course, there is no doubt here. So in the law of water inscribed by the limitation of port is as a modified water vessels. The ships go inside, get outside, and they bring heat, they bring dislocation, so these are modified waters. So this brings changes to patterns of the quality of the water. They can change ecosystems many times. They can reflow substances that I was in Europe not that long ago in a conference about this theme. There are ports with a lot of difficulty from the Second World War because we don't know exactly what's there. So to have operations there demands a work trying to understand very well before touching those sediments, and so including gathering systems that make no turbidity. Everything is enclosed, so the maintenance is needed in order for the ports to work, and so they affect and create impacts. There are direct on the habitat. of the water, fauna, and flora. Of course, I brought you an example here. The other was more important. Of course, there are some mitigation actions. For example, in Leixões, it's practiced of many other ports before any dredging. We can have gathering of sediments to understand contamination, how is the gathered material and the samples treated. I think that this slide is not here, it's not. But, for example, a lot of the sampling that we do is high quality sampling, and where we can, for example, I don't know how many million, I don't know if the engineer knows this, I don't know how many millions of cubic meter of sand that it's taken from the port and that it's clean and it goes to the beaches of Matosinhos and other actions to try to diminish this impact of dredging. This is not a theme here today, but there are ways of mitigating it and of reducing it, and good practices advise us to do this, and we in Leixões have these practices. So the classification, the position, there are contaminated sands that cannot be rejected in the hydric sea, so they are drained, they go to decontamination. It's one of the things that we have here is to dry solid waste in terms of sediments, contaminated sediments by the sea to the river, not the port. The impacts on the activity, on port activity, are not just associated with the activity. The operations themselves have risks, obviously. So, in that perspective, more than mitigation, of course, that mitigation is when we are in a step where we had the incident. More important than this is to have an assessment of the risks, and obviously here it's not to mitigate them, but to prevent them and trying to predict them, and of course to stop them from happening, right? So, of course, here, terminals and associated to each one of them, each one has its risk that's associated. If we see most of the ships, or almost no ship, comes to a port that doesn't bring dangerous cargo on different levels, from explosives to diluents, fuel, gasoline, things that are soft but that are classified as dangerous cargo. Of course, the port knows about this with the previous notes about the things they are dealing with, but associated with terminals of containers, noise, emissions, traffic, and the associated risks with dangerous cargo. So the prevention is to make an analysis, and we have two colleagues here that do it on a daily basis, Engineer Graça, ship by ship, the compatibility of the cargo that the ship brings, and its length in its compliance with the code of cargo on the sea, and the operations, knowing that we can accept the ship, or if we have some problem in doing so, or need to solve some problems. Of course, inside the port we have terminal oil ships. We have a different kind of structure with a monofloater, with terminals of entrance. We have a refinery. We have a context of risk here. And I say many times that, do you remember the last incident in Leixões? No one remembers this, because many people are working in order for this not to happen, so no accidents are of memory there. So we associate one accident of other that we had outside the terminal, but it was associated with works inside the port and not to the operation of the port itself. So what I want to say with this is that we need not to hide the activities of this time have risks within themselves, but we have many people working with us in order for the risks not to happen, preventing and taking preventive measures that usually are in handbooks of procedure, the ones that we call the safety handbook, in which we have the procedures when we have a refueling, when we have a risk operation. But I say many times that sometimes in the best picture, the problem occurs. So we need to know how to act. We don't want to use these means. We don't want to use these tools. But the fact is that we need to have them. And we need to have them ready, well oiled, to have teams prepared to act. So the plans of contingency plans, the internal emergency plans, so-called, with tools of help to warn and prevent, with sceneries that are preconceived according with the operation, and there are some tools of help to decide the ones who are managing the incident. These emergency plans in ports, I'm dividing this in two parts in case of incident, how to act, and the safety manual. But today, water and the subject of superficial water also have a lot of importance, obviously, today, to what are the matters that we spoke about before in protecting the marine environment. So there is a tendency to have water plans, and we have them in Leixões. Doctor here is the author of them, that in fact helps superficial waters, these are consumption waters, by the passenger ships that we have. But there is a tendency today, a huge tendency of having well-developed plans of impact reduction plans of the superficial waters, integrating them with the same importance as the procedure manual. Other level of impact are also the action of cargo itself. No doubt that the cargo, some of them more, others less, generate noise, particle emissions, they contaminate the soil if the areas are not water resistant. And so many times the mitigation measures themselves are unsustainable, and that's why mitigation measures must be in a certain time to resolve and to diminish the problem, and they clearly are measures of substitution until the definitive ones come across. With these cannons, wiring everything, in this case we have no dust, but we have almost 1 million of cubic meters in 4 days, so it's amazing. This cannot be a continuous measure. This needs to be a measure that needs to be solved in other different ways. The monitoring plans of air quality in the areas that each port has the idea that are the ones with greater impact, and these campaigns that tend to understand our fulfillment of what are the environmental law and the compliance with it. This is just a small detail of Leixões. It has its own station of monitoring, continuous monitoring online of air quality. And that, well, Engineer Graça associates with it the ships that are operating in a certain period for us to be able to understand how we are in terms of emissions, why, and many times these plans have two goals for both of us, is of registry and record, and trying to understand what we are doing, but other much more important is to trigger measures of reduction or improving this operation. Here, trying to compare with other stations of a national network of our behavior, trying to understand if many times certain excesses are to be attributed to the port or not. It's not always true, but many times it is. And also, other problem that we have, the noise discussion is quality of the air, superficial waters, quality of the air, and the noise are three themes that are within the concerns, the global concerns of those who are managing environmental problems in ports. An example of Leixões, we have sensors, and we are monitoring noise in the port area next to the cargo area that are issuing noise. So we have our conclusions then comparing with larger monitoring plans in the surrounding of ports and different points as from external entities in order to understand how are we complying and what measures. When I say ours, I mean ports, of course. Well, I should be here at 16:50. It's 4:30, so do you want to rest a little bit? Any questions? Do you want to make a comment, to say anything, to add something? Can I tell you about one more thing or two? Do we have any news from our colleagues? Are they sleeping? Well, what are our colleagues? What's happening with them? I'm just. Does anyone want to place any question? We would be very. We are eager to hear from you. Do you want to tell us something from abroad? How many minutes do we have? 20? Okay. I could have brought the 50 slides more. I shouldn't have cut my presentation. I think they are awake, and I think they are. Yeah, I think they're here. But it's because of the trainer or but for the subject itself? Okay. And here also, I see. Let's. I would like to say something. Yeah, I'm glad because, well, when operators propose themselves to improve ships, to increase the cargo capacity, are they questioning ports? Are they approaching ports? Or is that their problem at all? No, I said this before. Ships, each one of them manages their own business. That's the truth. If an operator, of those who are in shipping, well, if the ship reduces by the increase of the cost, it increases the value of the ship. So a ship that is accommodated in the sense of trying to find solutions, the ships of the AAA, they started building and the world understood they would be built. Then there are ports with the capacity of very quickly readjusting themselves to reinvest because they have reserved areas. As I said, like when they came outside, they had 5 ships in the world, 5 ports that could receive them, but the great ports in Europe can get them and can receive them today. So there is no consultation, there is no adjustment. The ship is outside, the ship is on the sea, and the ports need to make their own investments. Well, in a certain way, that happens also with the fuel that is used in ships. Now you see there is a growth, or we are witnessing a growth of shipbuilding, and the ports need to be adapted, ports and other entities to the supply of LNG for ships to be able to move around, right? Yeah, as you see, there is a project of LNG in the north part of Europe. There are ships that carry passengers, ferries. There are LNG, but there are operating in a circuit between 2 ports that are equipped with 2 or 3 ports that are equipped with LNG. But if all of a sudden we think of a distribution network all throughout the world to have ships of LNG, of course, in this time, Engineer Graça is in a project which is Costa, in which we are starting to clearly thinking about what about our units? Must they be converted? Because there is an adjustment, a natural adjustment of the market by the man, trying not to lose customers. No doubt there. Of course, the idea of the green perspective, there is no doubt that is present, and it's adjacent to more efficient ships. There are green ships, but has to do with the cost reduction. And if the cost is by the reduction of fuel, of course, the environment has a win-win situation here. So I don't want Anyway, to say that we are not thinking or building clearly in a green ship, of course we are thinking on a global cost of the exploration, in which the cost of fuel and the reduction of CO2 emissions today, it is a citizenship duty of companies, or in fact it is imposed by law. And so builders and operators, but this is not a business opportunity. If you see, a few years ago, ships had the so-called segregated parts. It's almost prehistoric ships when I came to the sea. So 40 years ago, I went in tank ships and we would wash ships from one port to the other. We came to Leixões to unload. We came from Syria to unload in Leixões, and we were washing tanks, and we were putting the product of the washing outside in the mileage that was authorized. I don't know say how many miles, because discharge contaminated, very contaminated water. Today, this doesn't exist. And the positive measures and the positive action is not only to be more controlled, because in the coast accompanying tanks are there is planes, other systems of satellite control, stains, fights in water. We were part of a project that would bring us the image by satellites on the Monowai with the monofloral device. We have images from the radar. There are other ways of controlling this problem, but there is in fact a concern of raising awareness from the side of builders and operators, and also ports. At a certain time, they try to bring awareness to have different ballasts. They have a discount, all that area, all that volume of ballast to transport the water of the ship. It has a discount the ships pay by the UGT, and that area, that volume is seen as a discount. So it's a positive incentive. This is a measure with a lot of years. Today, other measures are needed of environmental character, but that every time and every side on the ship, we need to be aware of the environmental issues. Many years ago, we started feeling this. In the port, it's easy to measure it in terms of trying to deliver bags of ash. A bag of ash is okay to put on the sea, but these are small evidences that show the concern from the diary in the compliance. It showed us about the importance to have JUP supporting the port activity, and you brought also the question that the goal is to evolve for the single logistics window in national terms. How is this structured? If we are advanced in that process, and if that will constitute in terms of future differentiating a positive difference on the national ports facing other ones. The single logistical window, let's put it like this, has a path and it has two projects. The first one was Miel, that ended, was the first stage, and this never happens alone. When we speak about single window, we cannot think about logistics itself in our logistical environment in the national scale, being a global business as it is. We need to think about partners, and we have a lot of European partners. Miel was a project that, if you will, it has a first survey of the needs and the path to follow. And we have the TrainMoS, which is another project for the single logistics window, which is trying this implementation with our partners. And these things are made trying to find pilot processes that help us to start a project that had critical mass. And we say that some call the others. When you have reference teams in the market that are helping us in a certain project, and there are partners at the beginning, it was with a port single window, it was with Specom, with other platforms. When we are looking to bring to the project important partners for the business that are of reference for others, and there are companies with the ability of investing in means and systems. So that single window in our positioning in it is without a doubt a factor of competition in the port because we are in the chain of business. The idea of this window is to um, publicize services of our colleagues from the um, cargo companies that are trying to look into a platform when we want to fly. What will we do? They sit down and see the cheaper price. I want to go from here to there. What are they offering me if I come here, if it has a weekend at the sea? This doesn't exist. There is no platform where we can look for a price from here to there. As a citizen, if I want to send something from some family in Azores, I need to see where do I take this to go to Azores. So, but today, anyone with the internet and a cell phone, if you want to go on vacations, you go and see what can they offer me, and that single window in terms of what is the business of cargo is a little bit like this: is to be put on a single platform to choose a cargo. Where I uh, put this on? Where will I deliver this? Where is the cheaper one? Where is the fastest? Who will do it? This is the development with partners of Europe. We have created a pilot that encloses in itself a series of technological innovation concepts, and it has been tested, which is the truck driver itself to whom has merchandise or cargo to transport. He gets a message to know where he needs to deliver it. When we just finish the business with a cargo company, I need to find someone to take this from here to there, trying to find in the platform the best partner for that operation. We cannot close ourselves in the national logistics environment. This is a global business. Of course, you can place a question. This has to do with the answer that the commander gave us. We saw that ships are a mean of transport that's most economical one in terms of costs by unit. And we saw also that the ships are being specialized in order to decrease that value. We saw that ports are specialized also. And all of this is getting together to make a more cheaper and faster way to transport cargo on the sea. But I was intrigued because you gave the example, maybe this happens more times than we would know, of a Portuguese importer in which cargo goes to Algeciras and goes by train and then by truck to get to its factory. And it seems that these logistics management has something where it goes and gets some different economic values. Of course, that's the logistics. The operators of ships that were operating port to port, but today we have the logistic operator from point A to point B. I don't care how I get from A to B. What I want to know is the cheaper and faster way to do it. And the operator on a lower level of the business can't understand, but with a platform that I help you to choose about the best mean from Algeciras here between port costs, because it's expensive, okay? With port A, not Leixões, has high cost. So between the port costs from port to port, maybe bringing the ship to the north to bring cargo to Leixões, unloading in Algeciras and having a good connection by land, the operator will decide a cheaper one, of course. Our mission in the port, that's what I said before, is to be able to find solutions in order that the sea is the best option. And that would bring us to a different debate. Train lines, for example, roads. But for example, when we put cargo on the road, we are creating roads, maintenance, accidents, associated costs. I'm saying this because I'm a man from the sea, and I have arguments against the road transport. But the sea is there. Sometimes the sea is a little bit stormy, but this will be solved with time if Algeciras they have a good connection by sea for Leixões into Leixões that it's efficient, effective, with simple procedures. Maybe the option one of these days be instead of going by one way or the other, you can come to Leixões with a ship, and that will depend on all of us to be able to supply services. For example, a ship that would go from Lisbon to Leixões, but that would stop in two Portuguese ports, has the same procedure in terms of documents as if it did intercontinent trip. If you want to bring a container with your own cargo, you go there, you freight the train, you bring your invoice and go to Germany, and in 1 or 2 days the truck is in Germany. So the shortest shipping that you put on the same ship, if the ship is as easy as this and gives you this same ability of sending the cargo, and the cargo that goes from a ship just take an invoice to deliver on the port, you have dedicated terminals when you arrive, like the truck. These are the factors of competitivity that bring our mission within our area of having in order to be competitive in the market. That's our challenge every day, right?
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to be here today. It's a theme that is very important for me, and I'd like to ask you two questions. We've spoken about the adoption of technologies or mechanisms to reduce the impact in terms of the ship, in terms of the operation, and of the supply chain. And I know that there are ports around the world that currently award give some awards to be able to help ships that already have some technology incorporated, such as hybrid and LNG. Why not give these awards as well to the cargo? That is, to all these people that are part of the chain in terms of transportation and in terms of port operation, and try to attract the cargo to the different ports. But this raises the question, of course, is this award, this exemption, for example, cannot go against some European rules, for example, the rules of the Green Book, that say that to use some infrastructure, the rates have to be adequate to the product. So this is the question. How do you see this here in Leixões clearly? So you asked me two questions. One of them is the possibility of doing it, and the other being able to put it in practice. Of course, this positive reinforcement, instead of punishing a ship that doesn't follow the rules, try to give him an award for doing everything right. So this is a tendency. I told you a few minutes ago about the reduction of some ships, but there are also other ships that are implementing some rules to the ship. So this cargo idea is not an innovation, but we're working towards this. And I've been talking to Graça Oliveira, and I can give you a clear example. We have a cargo here in Leixões, and we're asking ourselves, why do we not establish, for example, at Top Navio, cheaper prices to consolidate and relieve them in a such way? So if they unload bulk, it's one of the cargoes that has been giving us a lot of noise. With Graça Oliveira, we've been doing a study to see how much it helps increasing the cost of transport. We'll be able to quantify it soon enough, because if we go to the port next door, we can see that the price will be half the price we apply here. So the way here has to be traced, and we thought some things here. That is to do the opposite. If a ship comes with such a consolidation, it's about changing the modus operandi and going against what we're trying to do here. But this doesn't mean that we're doing dumping or that we're lowering the costs. No, it's the idea of avoiding something for the common good. And so I think it's a path that is not yet traced. It's not implemented right now. But I think that in some cargoes, at least we've been talking about it with Mrs. Graça, who is connected to an environment here in Leixões Port, and we also established some work to know how much this would represent in terms of transportation costs, and try to offer it as a discount as we offer in other ships. Nowadays, the cargo is, in terms of environment, is in our strategic plans as the first plan. The sustainability question is going to be the first point of our strategy. Of course, a port that provokes noises, gas emissions, is condemned to failure. Of course, the legislation will be tighter, the fiscalization also, and this will stop the business. And in a port like ours, that has a particularity, that is a port of insertion that has been growing towards the city, and that has the city in one point and the other, and we have to move within this space to grow our port. So this concept is a great idea in terms of awards that we call the green ships. But if it can contribute to implement some cargoes, absolutely, it's a great initiative. The factor of exceeding levels of noise or air quality led us to implement some measures that have costs. And what is happening in most cases and in most places nowadays, because little places internationalize these costs, this in a way is going to find some competitiveness in terms of price. If I have to implement some measures, and if I have costs with these measures, I can associate them to the cargo. If the next port doesn't do it, there's no dumping on my part by trying to reduce these rates for the people who do good. But this is not transversal to all areas, of course. One of the areas where the costs are internalized is the fact that all the ships have to participate in 30% in terms of residual costs. So whether he unloads or not in the port, I have to contribute to this cost, because all these pollutions do have a cost. We have to participate in it. In terms of residual waste in Leixões, when I've been around here, we usually didn't pay it when I was on the ship. We have nowadays people doing these services, but by then it was free. And they started making mandatory the cost of the recollection of this residual waste and of the accompaniment and its recycling, transformation, whatever the next step would be. We were then forced to attribute a cost to it, because formerly it just wasn't done. And nowadays we do have this cost that helps to sustain the structure in terms of polluter-payer principle. Everybody has to contribute and pay. If we do not contribute, we have to pay a tax. And if we deliver some waste, we have to pay for the waste that is delivered. But in terms of cargo, of course, it's an innovating idea and very interesting. And it's curious that you asked this question, because I've been talking about it with Graça for quite a long time, and we've been trying to implement measures and to try and find the best way, the best environmental friendly way to implement all this. Does the translator need water? No, thank you. I'm sorry, I forgot to turn off my phone. We'll now move on to the next module. Would you mind turning this off, please? Now I'd like to talk to you about the port, and especially the port of Leixões. Within this proximity of these two cities here, like many other ports, we are an example, a good example of how the city can influence the port and vice versa, and see how this proximity accompanies us every day. It has been a problem that wasn't always considered in this way, so here I just gathered a few slides to analyze a little bit and to understand that nowadays when we talk about the relationship between port and city, it's something that that some people have known, but not everyone. And even nowadays there are some tensions that are not completely solved, and that sometimes make this relationship a little bit more difficult. As I said before, it's impossible to deny that a great industry has its impacts, and that, of course, it affects the city and the surroundings. Here, as any other port, the port of Leixões has some areas with some beaches, has the city services here close to the port, and of course, our activities do have impacts from superficial waters to the city that surrounds us. And so our challenge in the ports is to maintain a certain competitiveness level, even better if we can, but in fact within a commitment of sustainable growth. And these are the key topics of nowadays. I don't remember who said it, but the more the ports are international, the more productive it is for the port managers. So the first point in our strategic plan is sustainability, and it has to be well evaluated and well thought through, and we need to know where we want to be. The urban integration and the relationship between the port and the city, it has to be incorporated. Otherwise, we won't be able to operate, and we can reach that limitation. And as I said, it's important to pass on to the population and to the city the image of a safe port. We only manage to pass on this image if we talk to people. I've been in a conference a little time ago with schools and with people living in Matosinhos, and I tried to talk to people and to hear their worries. And we had a little incident some time ago, and the beaches had to be evacuated. Some colleagues run away from here to go get their children, and so there was a great concern. And people lost a little bit of confidence in us, of trust. And so for our surroundings, this image is very important. We have some risk factors here, but who remembers the last incident? So back then, the port didn't communicate with the city. It was negatively seen by the city. And of course, there's some doubt that it installs with the oil ships entering the port. But back then, this communication wasn't in the administration and the management of the port. And nowadays, it's as important as good accessibility, according to me. Frankly, in the past, I thought that this was not so important, but nowadays I am sure that this is as important as the accessibility question, to share with the city all this information, and it has to be involved in the questions we deal with on a daily basis. We all know a little bit the story, but going back a little bit. When we used to talk about ports in the 16th or 17th centuries, around the discoveries times, the port was just a piece of the city. It just was part of it. By then, the port was a great commercial center, and it was a place of exchange of ideas, and it was the door to communication with other realities. This was a time of prosperity and of richness, where the port had an important role, a fundamental role, and it was part of the city and of the people, everyday life. What I basically say here is that is what a colleague of ours has been telling me, working in this area for so long. By then, with the technological revolution, industrial revolution, the ports start being exotic and innovative, and the port is by then seen as an event. The inauguration of a dock would bring lots of people. There's here a great jump. When we see pictures of this time, we can say that people identified in the port they were proud of this port and had a language that was very proper to them. So we can see here that the ports are exotic and dynamic, and we can see here that the passage from bale ships to vapor machines have increased the dimension of all these ports. As you know, here the port wine is exported to Europe, so it was a great center of business, and it has been condemned due to its limitation, independently of all the efforts of the aristocracy to keep it important. There were some limitations back then. At this phase, the port had its space and was valorized for its business, for its space. And the port is not exactly seen as a threat. But of course, our realities are what they are. Ports have been closing because of matters of security. They've been creating their own closed space, evacuating people, preventing them from being part of this context. And around the 19th century, there was a time where the outer site within the port was the one of an enemy. The port was seen as an enemy, as a threat to the quality of life. If you like this theme, please research the Professor Houdon, who's been treating widely this theme and has been looking at the sentimental values. He appeals to these sentimental values that are attached to a given time and to bring them today to this relationship between port and city. These slides are here in this little corner. These are them, are his. I didn't ask him if I could have his pictures, but I just wanted to show them to you for you to understand. We can see that here the port is seen as an industrial zone with no architecture of its own, that is closed between walls. And the population sees it back then as a pollution center, a center of accidents, collisions. There's a public perception of the port that is widely negative. Some areas are unhumanized, they're put apart from the society, they're isolated by walls, the port is closed on itself basically and has absolutely no access to the sea. The European red districts appear, so it's associated with alcohol, with diseases, with plagues. Even we here have a tower that was called the tower where some sanity residues were burned. I'm sorry, I can't remember the name. People used to be in quarantine there. But basically, the port is associated to illegal unloading, to drugs, to dangerous waste. What is said is that at the end of the century, there's a great tension between the port and the city because the port authority has the terrains with most value. People like to grow, like to have houses by the sea, and that's the area where the port wants to grow. So the city doesn't have to occupy these areas according to the port authorities, and so this creates some tensions and this difficulty approximation between who manages the port and who manages the city. This limitation has been creating some tensions during this last year. What has to be done and incorporated in our management is that the more international maritime transport is, the more we have to incorporate. Here we have to implement actions that take into account this public perception of the port. People have to be able to identify to their port, to share with us their concerns, to... Tonight, Graça Oliveira, with Mr. Sequeira, we have a neighbor here that has been complaining about the noise. So we said that we were going to help him and put together in his house some material, and we asked for his collaboration. We're going to make a campaign during the next 2 months. So we're going to make a sonometer, install it there, and we're trying to see exactly what the noise frequency is and try to see what we can do to help him. Just the fact of us telling people that we're going to try to solve their problems and to show concern, to tell our neighbors that we're going to go by and see what we can do for them, this increases the affinity between both. When he complained, this neighbor told us that he lives here in Port Leixões, that he was aware of that it was an employment center, but he told us that the noise level was too high and asked us to help him. So we're going to do it. Back then, things weren't like that. Back then, people would have told him to have double glazed windows and to close them, basically. But of course, nowadays this has to be done in some areas. There are ports nowadays that take care of the buildings soundproofing, for example, also in the neighbor's house. So sometimes it is incorporated in the port management. So between both extremes, there's some path that can be traced along the way, and there's some work that has to be done among managers. We often hear as a response, well, the port was here long ago, long before the house, but that's not an excuse. We have to help these people anyway, because lots of houses were even there before the port. So it's important to help people, try to improve some things if we have a negative impact. I cut the slide that I had there about a study regarding the port in terms of employment. I don't know if you have it on your paper version. Well, if you don't have it, I'll then give you a pen drive for you to take. But it's an important area in terms of employment and richness production. So this tension has been generated by this limitation. There's often problems with institutional aspects, with the port authority. Sometimes great advances are created and sometimes not so much. The space is indeed scarce, and the legislation doesn't allow us to use the spaces and to reconvert them as we would wish. There's, once again, here some obstacles to overcome to to move on. There are some port areas that are often used for activities related to the port, and so they're reorganized or requalified for activities of the city, but that have some affinity with the port anyway, trying not to lose that historical note between port and city. And then most projects of the maritime front don't have a lot of relation to the city. When we try here to intervene in a maritime front there, in the maritime front, we can see here that it's interesting to try to incorporate some aspects to improve this relationship. We have here some information that tells us that the port authorities have to incorporate some elements in their management to improve the relationship between the port and their environment, focusing on the people, on the human factor, people living in the city, employees. And in the past, this perception of the port wasn't like that, so it's a great evolution in this sense. We have here some innovations in the port. Others have been shared with the measuring of these questions coming from other ports. But we have here the relationship between the port and the city that is established to improve this public site on the port, this perception of the port's public image over time, and try to create an opportunity of relationship and to create engagement strategies between the port and the city. A few examples that are usually given and that we can give here in Leixões: improve the perceived public image through communication and engagement actions. We can use communication policies that integrate all our partners. We try an urban integration and enhancing the urban space and its surroundings. We try to involve the local community at public events that might bring some public to the port and lead them to take part in these events. And of course, the environmental management and security to try to improve the relationship between the port and the city. The way to communicate here, we have struggled back then to reach it. The Leixões port was the first to emit its report to as European port. And since then, so we can see our several sustainability reports. It's a way to communicate to the city what we produce, what residual waste we produce, how we deal with it. It's a way to communicate. And you're going to ask me if the city reads, if people are interested, if these reports are available in websites. Yes, people come looking for these reports and come read it. So these are sustainability reports, but they're not enough because it's not just about saying what we do. Most important and more important than that is to clearly have a full behavior around this sustainability plan. We need to have a sustainability plan with greater actions. For example, the sustainability report is, of course, a good initiative, but it's not the only thing that has to be done. But it's very important to have an operational plan, to have a series of actions that can be distributed within the company, in this case, in the port of Leixões, and that can be implemented, measures that can be implemented towards, oriented towards sustainability in terms of energy. We have two more instruments that that is a series of principles and commitments that are accepted by the companies, the working companies in the document, and some of our vendors as well. Some colleagues here are part of this evaluation committee. Through events and public expositions, we try to captivate the people as well. We try to show the historical heritage of the port. We tried here to publish pictures without people on them, but we can see children being very enthusiastic about it. These are images that when we come from the outside, we can see that they have some importance for people who come here. So we can see that this is an important fact in the relationship with the city. We have here several times of the history of the port, and we try to establish a connection with the past with it. Another strategy that is very recommended and that we've been developing and maturing and it's to increase the spaces of sociability within the port, places where people can come. We have several rooms that we use for several events for people who need them. Besides the business area, it's interesting to see that we organize many events here in the port and sometimes more public acts as well. And it's always a great day when such initiatives are taken. The port has a visitation program, a scheduled visits program. Schools can come. We organize events for the Infancy Day as well. Visits in town are organized with the schools here in the neighborhood, with our friends of the marketing department. So when schools are doing some papers on maritime transport, we have some visits from schools here in the port. We collaborate with several institutions. There are great practices here inserted within these spaces, these sociability spaces. We have here the port of Gaia. We have here several generations of the port that didn't leave so much history. That didn't leave lots of marks of its existence. The port of Gaia as more a touristic aspect nowadays, and was requalified, but it's nowadays a public area and a port area where nowadays there are basically no traces of the existence of a port. But there's some tradition that is maintained there anyway. We have other examples of requalification, namely the border areas between the port and the city. These are practices that are widely used. In Geneva, for example, we had that basin, which was the main port back then. So trying to find outer ships, other outside zones of occupation for big ships have to be found today because there's no space in our ports. Nowadays, in terms of area exchange, there's a name, but I can't remember it. I'm sorry. There are areas that are necessary for the port, but some other areas are created and we try to give them the same fame. It's some sort of compensation. The port needs this area to grow, but before growing, it creates and tries to recreate other areas, tries to restore the ecosystem, and tries to compensate the city with different areas to be able to accommodate bigger ships, for example. The recovery of what is our space in an architectural way. So try to give some space back to the city, or organizing some activities that are more urban, not spaces that are just built for the port. This this was the Lazaredo. It was an ancient area where that was used by the port, where we used to burn some herbs for disinfestation, for example. And nowadays it's been transformed in new spaces, and it was our way to give back a little bit to the institutions. And then we have the port day, the day in which the port is open to the city with visits, very interesting visits, and it's always a great day for the city, and we always have a great response to this visit. It's going to be around September this year as well, and we usually share the port with the city during these occasions. The big difference as well in terms of architecture, we saw, as the professor said a little while ago, that the storage units without images, nowadays we can see the care in the architecture in all the ports, the architecture of the buildings that are built in the ports. This is our new passenger station. It was inaugurated this month, and we can see here that this building has a particularity that it articulates the city with the port. And these good practices, this passenger station has an area that is clearly from the port to welcome passengers, but the three lower floors are occupied by the University of the Port of its Investigation Center, and here we have an investigation center that is shared with the port. And one interesting thing that brings us to this modernity, and it's the public connection to the whole building, except of course the area that is used for the port. I managed to get here without getting everyone in this state, so it's 5:30, and it's time for us to leave. Do we still have a little time? So it's time for the break. Yes, but before going to the break, I have 10 minutes to keep the schedule that was requested from me, not imposed, but requested. Any comments? Our friends from abroad, I'd like to hear from you. I'd like to hear one question from you. Well, not from abroad, from within, because we're all in the same communitary space, actually. But if you have any questions. Any comments from the room here? Any questions? No response from our colleagues? So I give you my best salutations from Leixões. We are nowadays a click away one from the others, and we're a great innovation port. So if you want to find out more about us, you may find our contacts in our port website. And if you have a question, anything you want to share with us, we'd be pleased to hear from you. Dear friends, colleagues, everyday work colleagues, thank you very much. I'll see you later. We're going to make a little coffee break right now. I didn't have I'm sorry, I can only translate what is being said into the microphone, but one of the colleagues in the room seems to be talking about a particular event